My name is Brielle Carter, and I was 32 years old when I learned that the person I planned to spend the rest of my life with needed to find himself before marrying me. 8 weeks before my wedding, I had everything planned. The venue was booked, the flowers were selected, the catering deposit was paid. Our honeymoon in Greece was reserved. Every tiny detail of the life Ethan Mitchell and I had spent years building was finally coming together. At least, that was what I thought. Ethan and I had been together for 4 years. We had been engaged for almost 2 years. To everyone around us, we were the couple who had made it through the hard parts. We had survived career changes, family problems, long-distance months, and every ordinary challenge that came with adulthood. I believed we were ready. Then one Monday morning, everything changed. We were sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee before work. Ethan had barely touched his breakfast, and I could tell something was wrong. "Brielle," he said quietly. I looked up. The tone of his voice immediately made my stomach tighten. "What happened?" He took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something." I smiled nervously. "Okay, you're scaring me." He looked down at his coffee. "I've been feeling overwhelmed about the wedding." For a second, I felt relief. Wedding anxiety. That was normal, right? I reached across the table and touched his hand. "Ethan, if the wedding feels too big, we can simplify things. We don't have to invite everyone your parents know. We can make changes." But he pulled his hand away. "No, it's not about the wedding." I froze. "Then what is it about?" He stared at the table. "I need time. Time. I need to find myself before we take this step." The room suddenly felt silent. I remember holding my coffee cup halfway to my mouth, unable to drink. "Find yourself." He nodded. "I've never really been alone, Brielle. I went from living with my parents to being with Madison, and then I was with you." My heart sank at the name. Madison, his ex-girlfriend from college. The woman he dated for 3 years before me. What does Madison have to do with this? Ethan quickly shook his head. "It's not like that." "Then explain." He sighed. "I talked to Madison's family. Her parents still have that cottage outside the city. They said I could stay there for a few weeks." I stared at him. "Wait." I almost laughed because the alternative was crying. "You want to move into your ex-girlfriend's family cottage to figure out if you want to marry me?" "Madison won't even be there," he said quickly. "She lives in Seattle now. It's just her parents and her sister. They're like family to me." I looked at the man sitting across from me. The man who had asked me to marry him. The man who had chosen another woman's family as the place where he wanted to understand his future. "Ethan, our wedding is in 8 weeks. His eyes filled with frustration. "This is exactly why I need space. You don't understand." "No," I whispered. "I'm trying to understand why the person you need space from is me." He ran a hand through his hair. "I need to know who I am outside of a relationship." I looked around our apartment. The photos on the walls. The furniture we picked together. The life we created. Then I looked back at him. "By staying with your ex-girlfriend's family, they're important to me too." That sentence hurt more than I expected, because I suddenly realized something. Madison's family was not the problem. The problem was that when Ethan became afraid of forever with me, his first instinct was to run toward something connected to his past, not toward me. I sat there quietly for a long time. Then I said the one thing he never expected. "Okay." His eyebrows lifted. "Okay." I nodded. "Take all the time you need." His expression softened. "You mean it?" "Yes." He smiled slightly, almost relieved. "I knew you would understand." He hugged me. But I stood there feeling something inside me breaking. Because I understood something he didn't. Sometimes giving someone space means giving them exactly what they asked for, even if that space becomes permanent. Ethan left that Wednesday. 2 suitcases, a few boxes, and one promise: "I'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks." He kissed my forehead. "The wedding is still happening. I just need this." I watched his car disappear down the street. Then I waited exactly 1 hour. After that, I started making my own decisions. The first thing I did was open my jewelry box. Inside was the engagement ring. A 2.5 carat princess-cut diamond on a platinum band. The ring Ethan bought for me cost $18,000, and sitting there alone in our apartment, I realized something. That ring represented a promise Ethan was no longer sure he wanted to keep. The next morning, I walked into the jewelry store. The manager recognized me immediately. "Miss Carter, how is the wedding planning going?" I placed the ring on the counter. "Change of plans." His smile faded. "I need to return this." He looked at me carefully. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "Absolutely." He processed the return. Every document was still there. Every certificate. Every receipt. And because we were still within the return period, I received the full $18,000 back. The next thing I canceled was the honeymoon. 2 weeks in Greece. Flights. Hotels. Tour. Everything we had planned. I spent hours making calls and negotiating refunds. Some money was lost, some was recovered. But by the end of the week, I had thousands back that would have disappeared forever. Then I did something Ethan never expected. I booked a flight. Not for work, not for family, not because someone needed me. For me. Bali. 1 month. A beach villa. A fresh start. The night before my flight, I packed a small suitcase. For the first time in years, I packed without thinking about someone else. No wedding, no fiancé, no future I was afraid to lose. Just myself. At the airport, I posted a picture of my boarding pass. No caption. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Where are you going?" I smiled, then typed, "Finding myself." His response came instantly. "This isn't funny, Brielle." I looked at the message for a moment, then replied, "Neither was moving into your ex-girlfriend's family cottage 2 months before our wedding." The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared. I turned my phone off and boarded my flight. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't running away. I was finally choosing myself. 20 hours later, I landed in Bali. The moment I stepped outside the airport, the air felt different. Warm, heavy, with the scent of the ocean. Alive. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about seating arrangements, guest lists, or whether Ethan would change his mind before walking down the aisle. I wasn't waiting for someone else to decide my future. I was finally living my own. The villa I rented looked almost unreal. A small, private beach area. An infinity pool overlooking the water. An outdoor shower, surrounded by tropical plants. It was the kind of place Ethan and I had talked about visiting someday. Except now I was there alone. And strangely, I didn't feel lonely. I posted my first photo from the villa. Just the sunset. No explanation. No dramatic caption. Just a picture of a beautiful moment. For about 5 minutes, everything was peaceful. Then I turned my phone back on, and it exploded. 27 missed calls. 39 messages. Most of them from Ethan. A few from his mother, Linda. And several from his sister, Samantha. I stared at the screen, almost amused. The same man who asked for space was now angry that I actually gave it to him. Ethan's messages were the first ones I opened. "Brielle, we need to talk. You can't just leave. What about the wedding plans? This is extremely immature." I read the last one twice. Immature. Interesting. Because somehow me flying across the world was immature. But him moving into his ex-girlfriend's family cottage 8 weeks before our wedding was considered personal growth. Then came a message from his mother. "Brielle, Ethan is very upset. Please call him. This isn't how adults handle problems." I stared at that one for a while. Then another appeared. From Samantha. "Are you seriously in Bali right now? Ethan is stressed and trying to work through things." I almost laughed. Trying to work through things. That phrase sounded so innocent. Like he had gone to a meditation retreat. Not to the home of the family of the woman he used to love. I finally replied to Ethan. "You wanted space. I'm giving you space." His answer came immediately. "You're just trying to punish me." I leaned back on the chair beside the pool. "No, Ethan. I'm doing exactly what you're doing. Finding myself." A few seconds passed. "This is different." I smiled. "How?" The response took longer. "I'm doing serious self-reflection. I looked around at the ocean in front of me, then typed, and I'm reflecting while sitting near a beach. Sounds like we're both making progress. He didn't respond for several minutes. Then, you're making a joke out of our relationship. I looked at the screen. Our relationship. The same relationship he had temporarily abandoned. I wrote, I didn't make our relationship uncertain. You did. That night, I went to a small beach restaurant. I ordered seafood. I watched the waves. I talked with travelers from Australia and Germany who were sitting nearby. Nobody knew me as Ethan's fiancé. Nobody cared about our wedding. Nobody expected me to be the perfect future wife. I was just Brielle, and that feeling was addictive. The next morning, I posted another story. A breakfast table overlooking the ocean, fresh fruit, coffee, sunlight. The caption, learning that peace feels different when you choose it yourself. Within minutes, Ethan called. I almost ignored it, but eventually I answered. Brielle. His voice sounded exhausted. Ethan, what are you doing? I looked at the ocean. Having breakfast. In Bali. Yes. Seriously. I smiled. You asked me to find myself. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Silence. Then he sighed. I meant, I needed time to think. So did I. Brielle, this isn't a vacation. I looked at the waves. Isn't that exactly what you're doing? No. You're staying in a cottage owned by your ex-girlfriend's family while deciding if you want to marry me. His voice became defensive. Madison isn't even there. Your sister told me she visited. A pause. She just came to see her parents. Right. Brielle, stop making this something it isn't. I closed my eyes. Ethan, I'm not making it anything. I'm looking at the choices you made. I needed somewhere familiar. And I wasn't familiar. That's not what I said. But that's what you showed me. He became quiet. Then he said softly, I'm coming back. When? Soon. How soon? Maybe another week or two. I laughed quietly. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. Our wedding is in 6 weeks. I know. And you might need another 2 weeks at your ex's family's house. Stop saying it like that. How should I say it? Like I'm trying to fix myself. I looked down at the sand beneath my feet. Maybe you are. He sounded relieved. Exactly. I continued. But you're fixing yourself somewhere you chose over fixing things with me. Another silence. Then he whispered. You're really angry. No, Ethan. I looked at the horizon. I'm disappointed. That seemed to hurt him more. Because anger meant I still wanted to fight. Disappointment meant something had already changed. He ended the call without saying goodbye. For the next few days, I created a routine. Something completely different from my old life. I woke up before sunrise. I tried yoga, even though I had never done it before. I took surfing lessons. I explored temples. I joined cooking classes. I learned how to make traditional Balinese dishes. I met people who knew nothing about my past. And slowly, I started remembering the person I was before becoming someone's fiancé. On the 5th day, my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. Madison's father's name, Trevor. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. I answered. Brielle. His voice sounded uncomfortable. Hey, it's Trevor. I know. A long pause. Look, I know this situation is weird. I almost smiled. Yeah, it is. Ethan is really upset. He wanted space. He's struggling. So am I. Trevor sighed. Brielle, you need to come home. I looked at the ocean. No. He's trying to figure things out. And I am too. This isn't helping. I laughed softly. Trevor, do you hear yourself? What? You're telling me I need to come home because my fiancé is upset while he's staying with your family. He's not staying with me. Your family. My parents invited him. Exactly. Trevor went quiet. Then he said, nothing is happening between them. I leaned back. That's not the point. Then what is? The point is that when Ethan became afraid of marrying me, he went somewhere connected to you. Trevor didn't answer. And somehow that silence said more than words. Then he finally said, you know, he's been talking to Madison for months, right? My heart stopped. What? Just friendly conversations. About what? I don't know. But you knew. I didn't think it was my place. I stared out at the water. You didn't think it was your place to tell me that my fiancé was questioning our wedding with his ex-girlfriend. Trevor sighed. I didn't want to get involved. I looked at my phone. Congratulations. For what? You're involved now. I ended the call. For the first time since arriving in Bali, I felt something heavier than sadness. Not anger, not jealousy. Clarity. Ethan didn't just need space. He had already created emotional distance, long before he left. That afternoon, Ethan's mother commented publicly on one of my photos. Some people avoid responsibility when relationships become difficult. Ethan is taking time to grow while others are playing games. I stared at the comment. Then I replied, You're right, Linda. Everyone deserves space to grow. I hope Ethan finds what he's looking for. I know I am. Within an hour, her comment disappeared. But not before dozens of people saw it. My phone started filling with messages from mutual friends. Everyone wanted to know what happened. I didn't explain. I didn't defend myself. I simply posted another photo. Me signing up for a pottery class. The caption, Building something new. A few minutes later, Ethan texted, Can you please stop posting? Everyone is asking me why you're in Bali. I replied, Tell them the truth. What truth? That we're both finding ourselves. His response came quickly. This isn't the same. I looked at the message. Then typed, Maybe that's the problem. The wedding vendors started calling on the 10th day. At first, I ignored the unknown numbers. I had switched to a local SIM card, and I was only checking my emails once a day. I wasn't trying to disappear. I was simply trying to create distance from the chaos waiting for me back home. But eventually the messages piled up. The venue needed confirmation on the final guest count. The caterer needed approval for the remaining payment schedule. The florist wanted to finalize the arrangements, and every single one of them was reaching out because the wedding was approaching. Except, the bride and groom were no longer standing on the same side. Ethan was suddenly trapped. He couldn't make changes without my approval. He couldn't cancel without my signature. He couldn't postpone without my agreement. For the first time, he was experiencing the weight of the decision he had made. Then I received an email from him. A long one. The kind of message people write when they realize their actions have consequences. I opened it while sitting on my villa balcony. The ocean was calm. The sky was bright. And Ethan's words felt like they belonged to another life. Riel, I know you're angry. I understand why you're hurt. Maybe I handled everything the wrong way. But leaving everything behind and going to Bali isn't the answer. We still have responsibilities. The wedding is still scheduled. Our families have made plans. We have deposits that could be lost. I've had time to think. I realize I made a mistake. I'm ready to come home and work through this together. Madison means nothing to me. Her family was just familiar when I was scared. I wasn't running toward her. I was trying to understand myself. Please come home so we can fix this. I read it twice, not because I was unsure, because I wanted to understand how Ethan could still believe this was something we could simply repair. I typed my response slowly. Ethan, I'm not angry. I'm in Bali. You wanted to find yourself with your ex-girlfriend's family. I wanted to find myself somewhere else. We are both doing what we felt we needed to do. A few seconds later, he replied, This isn't fair. I looked at that sentence. Fair. That word had become almost meaningless. I answered, You should have thought about fairness before leaving 8 weeks before our wedding. His response came immediately. I'm coming home. I stared at the screen. Then, when? Soon. That's not an answer. A few weeks. I smiled sadly. You realize that was exactly the answer you gave before leaving, right? No response. Then, you're enjoying this. I looked around. The beach, the sunlight, the quiet, and I realized something. I wasn't enjoying his pain. I was enjoying my freedom. That evening, I called my mother, not because I needed permission, because she was the one person I knew would tell me the truth. The moment she answered, she asked, Brielle, honey, what is happening? I laughed softly. Mom, how much did Ethan tell you? Only that you're in Bali and things are falling apart. I looked at the sunset. Ethan moved into his ex-girlfriend's family cottage to figure out whether he wanted to marry me. Silence. Complete silence. Then my mother said, "He did what?" I repeated it. She didn't speak for several seconds. Then, she said, "Brielle, if someone needs to live with their ex's family to decide whether they love you, they already answered the question." I closed my eyes. Those words hurt, but they also felt like a truth I had been avoiding. "Thanks, Mom. Send me pictures." I laughed. "What? Your father wants to see Bali. He doesn't care about Ethan's drama. He wants pictures of temples." For the first time in days, I laughed genuinely. That night I received another unexpected message. This time from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Brielle. This is Linda. Ethan's family told me you two have been having problems. I think there has been a misunderstanding." I stared at the message, then replied, "What misunderstanding?" Her answer came quickly. "Ethan needed peace and quiet. He needed time to think. Madison being there is just a coincidence." I looked at the words, Madison being there. The fact that she felt the need to explain, that told me everything. I responded, "Linda, with respect, my fiancé is staying at the cottage owned by his ex-girlfriend's parents. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a choice." Her reply was immediate. "They are not together. Nothing inappropriate is happening." I looked at the screen, then typed, "I never said they were. The problem is not only what happened. The problem is why he chose that place when he was supposed to be building a future with me." Linda sent another long message about commitment, about patience, about supporting someone through difficult times. I read every word. Then I put my phone down. I didn't respond because I finally understood something. Everyone around Ethan wanted me to understand his feelings, but nobody was asking him to understand mine. Later that night, I went to the beach. There was a fire dance performance near the water. I watched strangers celebrate life, music, and movement. I recorded a short video. No explanation, no message, just a moment. Within minutes, Ethan commented, "Really?" I looked at the screen. For a second, I considered answering seriously. Instead, I just replied with a simple heart emoji, because I was done defending every moment of happiness. 2 weeks after Ethan left, something unexpected happened. He came home, alone. The first message I received was short. "I'm back." I stared at it. Then, another appeared. "Madison and I are just friends. Nothing happened." I waited, then replied, "How was your self-discovery?" A few minutes passed. Then, I realized I want to marry you. I looked at the ocean outside my villa, then typed, "After 2 weeks with Madison's family, you realize that." His answer, "It wasn't like that." I replied, "Then what was it like?" The typing bubble appeared, stopped, appeared again. Finally, we talked about old memories, about life, about relationships, about my fears. And I realized I was scared of forever. I read the message carefully, then asked the question I already knew the answer to. "And Madison helped you realize you wanted me?" His response came immediately, "Stop making it sound wrong." I looked at the words. Wrong. Again, he wanted me to focus on his intention instead of his decision. I answered, "I'm not making it sound wrong, Ethan. I'm listening to what happened." He called. I answered, "Brielle, please." His voice sounded desperate. "I'm trying to fix this." I looked at the waves. Fix what? Our relationship. I was quiet, then said, "I'm not broken." Silence. Brielle. The version of our relationship you left behind is gone. The wedding is in 6 weeks. I closed my eyes. Is it? Yes. I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. No, Ethan. The wedding where the groom left to figure out if he wanted the bride? A long silence followed. Then he whispered, "You're really canceling everything." I looked down at my empty ring finger. Yes. And for the first time, I knew I meant it. Ethan went quiet after that. For almost a minute, neither of us said anything. I could hear the sound of the ocean behind me. He could probably hear the silence of the apartment where we had planned our future. Finally, he spoke. "Brielle, what about the ring?" I looked down at my hand. The place where that ring had been for almost 2 years. The ring? Yes. The engagement ring. I knew exactly where this was going. It's gone. What do you mean it's gone? I returned it. There was a pause. Then his voice changed. You returned my ring. I closed my eyes, not because I felt guilty, because I couldn't believe we were having this conversation. Your ring. Yes, my ring. Ethan, you bought a ring to symbolize our marriage. Exactly. And then you left to figure out whether you wanted that marriage. That doesn't mean you can just take it away. I leaned back against the chair. It wasn't taken away. It was returned. You had no right. I almost laughed. No right. Brielle, that was an $18,000 ring. Yes. You just sold it. I returned it. For what? I looked at the ocean. For a fresh start. Silence. Then Ethan's voice became sharper. You're unbelievable. I felt something inside me shift. Months ago, that sentence would have destroyed me. Now, it just confirmed what I already knew. You moved into your ex-girlfriend's family cottage 2 months before our wedding. Madison wasn't there. That doesn't change the choice you made. You're acting like I cheated on you. No. I paused. I'm saying you abandoned our relationship when things became serious. That's not what happened. It is exactly what happened. His breathing became heavier. I was coming back. I nodded slowly. After 2 weeks. Because I needed time. And I needed someone who didn't need time away from me to decide if I was the person they wanted. He didn't answer. Then he said, I'm calling the venues. I almost smiled. Good luck. What does that mean? It means you can't cancel everything without my signature. I'll figure it out. Okay. You sound like you don't care. I looked around my villa. The place where I had started rebuilding myself. I care. My voice softened. I care enough to stop pretending this didn't hurt me. He was quiet again. Then he whispered, I love you. Those words hurt more than anger, because I believed he meant them. That was the hardest part. Ethan wasn't a villain. He wasn't a terrible person. He was someone who got scared and made a selfish choice. And sometimes, that was enough to destroy something. I loved you too, I said. The line went silent. Then I continued. But love isn't enough when trust disappears. He ended the call. The next morning, Ethan posted something on social media. I didn't see it at first. A friend sent it to me. The post said, some people reveal who they really are when things get difficult. I needed space to heal and grow, but instead of support, I was abandoned. Grateful I discovered the truth before making the biggest mistake of my life. I stared at the screen. For a moment, I felt angry, not because he was upset, because he had rewritten the story. He had turned himself into the person who was hurt. And somehow I became the person who walked away. But I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I didn't write a paragraph explaining every detail. I simply posted another picture. A Bali sunset. No caption, no explanation, just peace. The comments exploded anyway. Some people defended Ethan. Others questioned why someone preparing for marriage needed to stay with an ex-girlfriend's family. For the first time, I wasn't fighting to prove my side. I didn't need everyone to understand. I understood. And that was enough. By the 20th day in Bali, our mutual friends started choosing sides. My friend Daniel messaged me. Brielle, can I ask something? Sure. Did you really return the ring while Ethan was gone? I looked at the message, then answered, yes. A few minutes later, he says you did it to punish him. I replied, I did it because the engagement ended when he chose another place to decide whether he wanted it. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Then, honestly, I understand why you feel that way. Not everyone did. Ethan's friend Nicole sent me a very long message, almost a full essay. She accused me of being cold, of not understanding emotional struggles, of turning Ethan's vulnerability into a punishment. I read the entire thing. Then I replied with one photo, a picture of the pottery class I had joined. The caption, learning to create something new, one imperfect piece at a time. Nicole responded, This proves you don't take anything seriously." Then she blocked me. I smiled, because a month ago I would have spent hours trying to convince her I wasn't a bad person. Now, I went back to shaping clay. For the first time in years, I was doing something messy without worrying about making it perfect. A few days later, Ethan's family stopped asking for understanding. They hired a lawyer. His father, Robert Mitchell, sent a formal email. The demands were almost unbelievable. They wanted half the value of the engagement ring, reimbursement for wedding deposits, compensation for emotional distress. The honeymoon transferred into Ethan's name. I forwarded everything to my cousin who worked as a lawyer. His response was simple. "Brielle, this is ridiculous." Then he explained. The ring was a conditional gift. The condition was marriage. Ethan leaving before the wedding weakened his claim. The contracts required both signatures. The honeymoon was booked under my name and paid with my card. And the emotional distress claim would be difficult to prove considering the circumstances. For the first time since this nightmare began, I laughed. Not because it was funny, because I realized how far everything had gone. The person who left to find himself was now trying to force me back into the life he had walked away from. Then, Ethan texted me, "Can we handle this without lawyers?" I stared at the message, then answered, "You hired one." His response, "My dad did." I replied, "Same difference." A few minutes later, "I just want what's fair." I looked at those words. Fair. Everyone wanted fair, but nobody had asked what was fair to me. So I typed, "Fair." Okay, let's calculate the emotional cost of having my fiancé move into his ex-girlfriend's family home before our wedding. Then we can discuss the ring. His response came instantly. "This isn't funny," I replied. "Neither was finding out Madison had been someone you talked to about your doubts for months." A long pause. Then, "She was just a friend." I stared at the screen. That sentence, the sentence everyone uses when they know something looks wrong, but don't want to admit it. I typed, "Maybe she was. Maybe she wasn't. But I know one thing. When you were afraid of marrying me, you didn't come to me. You went to her world." No response. Finally, "My lawyer will handle this." I answered, "Good. Mine will too." Then I put my phone down. That night, I attended a traditional Balinese ceremony. I was invited by people I had only known for a few days. People who knew nothing about my failed engagement, nothing about Ethan, nothing about the wedding. They only knew me as Brielle, a woman who had arrived alone and somehow found herself. I posted one photo, a candlelit ceremony under the stars. The caption, "Some cultures still believe commitment means showing up." Interesting concept. Ethan viewed it within minutes. But this time, he didn't comment. He didn't call. He just watched. And maybe for the first time, he was finally starting to understand. By the 30th day in Bali, I had stopped counting how many times Ethan's name appeared on my phone. At first, every notification made my heart race. I thought maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was him finally understanding what he had done. But eventually, I realized something important. Not every message from the person who hurt you is an invitation to heal. Sometimes it's just another attempt to reopen a wound. My month in Bali was almost over. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I had arrived there broken. Not completely shattered, but cracked. Like something beautiful that had been dropped and was trying to figure out if it could still hold water. Somewhere between sunrise, yoga sessions, cooking classes, and conversations with strangers who became friends, I started putting myself back together. Not for Ethan, not to prove anything, for me. Then, 2 days before my flight home, I received a message. From Trevor? Ethan's ex-girlfriend, Madison's former boyfriend. I stared at the name for a moment. The irony wasn't lost on me. The person connected to the beginning of this disaster was now reaching out near the end. I opened the message. "Brielle, I know this is probably weird, but I wanted to talk." I replied. "About what?" A few minutes passed. Then, "About Ethan." Isaihu. Of course. Everyone wanted to talk about Ethan. Almost nobody wanted to talk about what I had gone through. I answered, "Go ahead." His next message appeared. I just want you to know that nothing happened between Ethan and Madison. I stared at the screen, then smiled sadly, because somehow everyone still thought that was the only issue. I typed, Trevor, I believe you. A pause. You do? Yes, because that was never the point. He took longer to answer. Finally, then, what was the point? I looked out at the ocean. The same ocean that had watched me cry on my first night in Bali. The same ocean that had watched me laugh again. Then I wrote, the point is that when Ethan became afraid, he didn't choose me. He didn't choose a conversation with me. He didn't choose counseling with me. He chose somewhere connected to his past. Trevor replied, he really does love you. I looked at those words, then typed, maybe he does. Another pause. But loving someone and choosing them are different things. That was the sentence I needed to hear. Not from Ethan, not from anyone else, from myself. 3 days later, I was back home. The apartment looked exactly the same. The couch, the pictures, the kitchen table where Ethan told me he needed space. Except everything felt different. Because I was different. I had barely unpacked when someone knocked on my door. I already knew who it was. When I opened it, Ethan was standing there. He looked exhausted. His hair was messy. His eyes were tired. For a moment, I saw the man I loved. The man who made me laugh. The man who used to hold my hand when I was nervous. Then, I remembered the man who walked away when I needed him most. Can we talk? He asked. I stepped aside. Okay. We sat on the front steps outside my apartment. Not inside. Somehow that felt important. This wasn't our home anymore. Not really. For a few minutes, Ethan just stared at the ground. Then he whispered, I made a mistake. I didn't answer. I was scared. Still nothing. The wedding. The future. Everything suddenly felt so permanent. I looked at him, and Madison's family felt easier. He swallowed. Yes. At least, he was honest. I knew them. They knew me before all the pressure. I nodded slowly. And I didn't. That's not what I meant. But that's what happened. His eyes filled with tears. I thought I needed to remember who I was before getting married. I looked at him. And what did you discover? He wiped his face. That I want you. The words were painful, because a part of me had waited months to hear them. But another part of me knew something had changed. Ethan, I'll do anything. He leaned closer. Therapy, couples, counseling, whatever you need. I looked down at my hands, at the empty finger where the ring used to be. Do you understand what hurt me the most? He looked up. That you went to Madison. I shook my head. No. I took a breath. That you were unsure about me, and instead of coming to me, you searched for answers somewhere else. His face fell. I was confused. I know. I never wanted to hurt you. I know. Then, why can't we fix this? I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was still the person I loved for 4 years. But he was also the person who showed me what he did when life became difficult. And that mattered. Because I don't know what happens the next time you're scared. His eyebrows tightened. What do you mean? I swallowed. Next year. 5 years from now. When marriage gets hard? When we have problems? When life isn't easy? I paused. Who do you run to then? His face changed. Because he didn't have an answer. There won't be a next time. I nodded. You're right. He looked hopeful. There won't. His expression broke. Betrayal. I can forgive what happened. His eyes lifted. But I can't build a marriage on the fear that the next time things get difficult, I'll be the last person you choose. He started crying. I love you. A tear fell down his cheek. I love you too. I said it quietly. And that was the hardest truth. Because sometimes, love is real. And still not enough. He stood there for a long time. Then finally asked, So this is it? I nodded. Yes. He walked away. And for the first time, since everything began, I didn't feel like I had lost something. I felt like I had saved something. Myself. The wedding date arrived 6 weeks later. The date that was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, I was in Las Vegas with my closest friends. No wedding dress. No ceremony. No promises I wasn't ready to keep. Just laughter, music, and a reminder that life continued. I posted one picture. At poker table. A drink. My friends smiling. The caption, dodged a disaster. Won a hand. A few hours later, Ethan texted, "Today should have been our wedding day." I looked at the message. Then replied, "It was supposed to be. Nothing else." Because sometimes closure doesn't require a long explanation. Sometimes it's just accepting that something ended and letting it stay ended. A few months later, I heard through mutual friends that Ethan and Madison had started dating. At first, I felt nothing. Not anger, not jealousy. Nothing. Then, about 5 months later, Trevor called me. I answered, "Brielle." "Hey." His voice sounded different, older somehow. "Told you I'd understand eventually." I smiled slightly. "What happened?" A long pause. "Madison and Ethan broke up." I leaned back. "Why?" Trevor sighed. "Same reason. I already knew. She needed time to figure herself out." "Yeah." I laughed quietly, not because someone's pain was funny. Because life had a strange sense of repetition. Some people don't change until they finally experience the consequences of their own choices. Trevor said, "I get it now." I looked at the pottery vase sitting on my shelf. The one I made in Bali. It was crooked. The shape wasn't perfect. The surface had small imperfections. But I loved it. Because it was honest. "It was an expensive lesson," Trevor said. I smiled. "For Ethan, maybe." I touched the vase. "For me." I looked around my apartment. My life. My peace. It bought me freedom. The wedding vendors eventually came after both of us for cancellation fees. Because while Ethan and I ended our relationship, the contract still existed. In the end, Ethan had to pay his half. About $4,000. His father was furious. But I didn't care. Because that money wasn't the price of losing a wedding. It was the final payment for leaving a life that no longer belonged to me. The villa owner in Bali still sends me birthday messages. I might go back next year. Not because I'm running away, not because I'm trying to prove anything, but because I found something there, a version of myself I thought I had lost. The pottery vase still sits on my shelf. It's uneven. It's imperfect. It's not the most beautiful thing I own. But every time I look at it, I remember something. At least it knows exactly what it is. And it never needed someone else to help it find itself.